In a small, forgotten village, a young boy named Adajou is haunted by the mysterious death of his mother. Left to fend for himself, he finds comfort in a portrait of her, yet little does he know this portrait holds more than just memories. It is the key to an ancient secret. One fateful night, as hunger and loneliness push him to the edge, his mother's spirit reaches out to guide him on a path he never imagined. What lies ahead? A journey to uncover the truth of his bloodline, one that will challenge everything he thought he knew. Will he survive the truth or be consumed by it? The sun had long dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the small village. Yet in a tiny room tucked behind an old crumbling house, the cry of a child echoed soft and desperate. 7-year-old Adajou sat on the cold, uneven floor, clutching an empty plate with trembling hands. His stomach growled in protest, an empty, hollow sound that mirrored the emptiness inside his frail body. "Mommy, please," he whispered through cracked lips, the words barely escaping his dry throat. He closed his eyes tightly, trying to block out the gnawing hunger, the pain that had become his constant companion for the last 2 days. "I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm going to die. Please, just something, anything." The little boy's body was weak, his ribs pushing sharply against his skin like the sharp sticks of an abandoned fire. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, but it wasn't just the hunger that tortured him. It was the gnawing ache in his chest, a hollow pain that no amount of food could ever fill. The pain of being forgotten, of being invisible to the world. His mother had died 3 months ago, and since then life had become a suffocating nightmare. In the place where love once dwelled, there was now only indifference and cruelty. His father, once a kind man, had remarried quickly after his mother's death, and the woman who became his stepmother, Madame Kofo, made it clear from the first day that Adajou was no longer welcome. Every morning she would serve her own children large plates of steaming food-fried eggs, fresh bread, sweet drinks. But when it came to Adajou, she would look through him as if he didn't exist. Even when he greeted her, she would hiss at him and walk past her eyes cold, indifferent. "Just do whatever she says, Adajou." His father had said one day, his voice distant, his eyes glued to his phone as if he were somewhere far away in another world, "Don't cause trouble." That was the moment when Adajou felt his heart crack in two. He was no longer just motherless, now he was also fatherless. His father, who once held him close and whispered that everything would be okay, had become a shadow of the man he used to be. And Madame Kofo. She had no place in her heart for him. She saw him as nothing more than a nuisance, a burden. Every day after school, while other children ran to their homes with excitement, Adajou dragged his feet like a prisoner heading to his cell. When he reached the house, his step-siblings would be playing in the living room, their laughter ringing out, but it was never for him. If he tried to join them, they would shout at him, "Go away, you smell," or pour water on the floor and make him clean it up while they watched and laughed. Once his stepbrother had kicked his food bowl away, refusing to let him even have the scraps that fell from the table. His only refuge was the small dusty store at the back of the house, the room filled with old buckets, torn bags, and forgotten things. It was the only place where Adajou could find a semblance of peace. It was here that he would curl up on the floor each night, hugging his knees to his chest, his only companion, the framed picture of his late mother. Her face in the photo smiled softly, lovingly, as if she were still there watching over him. "Mommy, I miss you," he would whisper, his voice cracking with sorrow. "They don't want me here. I'm so hungry. Mommy, please help me." But there was no answer, only the silence of the room, only the cold emptiness. Yet despite the darkness, something strange and inexplicable happened one afternoon. It was around 3:00 p.m., the sun beating down hard, casting an oppressive heat over the house. Madame Kofo had taken her children out, and the house was eerily quiet. Adajou hadn't eaten since the day before, and his body was growing weaker with each passing hour. His head spun, and every step he took felt like a struggle. His stomach twisted in hunger, a constant reminder of the void inside him. Slowly, he took his small plastic plate, the one his mother used to serve him food with, and walked into the inner room where she had once slept. The room was still as it had been when his mother had passed. Dust hung in the air and cobwebs danced in the corners. The framed picture of his mother still hung on the wall, her calm smile seeming to offer a silent reassurance, a promise that she was watching over him. He knelt before the picture, his heart heavy with the ache of longing. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice trembling, "I don't know what to do. I'm so hungry. Please help me." His tears fell onto the plate, a silent prayer for something he could not yet understand. And then, as if the world itself held its breath, something miraculous happened. As he sat there, his eyes squeezed shut, his body trembling from both hunger and fear, he felt the plate grow warm in his hands. Slowly he opened his eyes, and what he saw took his breath away. The plate was full of steaming white rice, rich with pieces of meat on top. The smell, oh the smell! It filled the room like a breeze from heaven, so rich, so comforting that for a moment Adajou couldn't breathe. He stared at the plate, wide-eyed and disbelieving. "Is this a dream?" he whispered to himself, his voice shaky, his heart pounding. His hands trembled as he reached out, barely able to comprehend what he was seeing. He looked again at the framed picture of his mother. Was her smile wider, brighter? He didn't understand. He couldn't explain what had just happened, but one thing was certain: something had answered his cry. His mother, or someone who cared, had fed him. His heart raced as he picked up the plate, his hands shaking with both fear and hunger. With slow, tentative steps, he moved to the center of the dusty floor and sat down, never taking his eyes off the picture of his mother. "Thank you, Mommy," he whispered through his tears, his voice full of gratitude and disbelief. Then, without hesitation, he began to eat. At first, he took small, careful bites, savoring the taste of the food, each mouthful filling the emptiness inside him. But hunger, like a beast inside him, demanded more, and soon his hands moved faster, stuffing the rice into his mouth, not caring about chewing. Each bite was like medicine to his weak body, each grain of rice a promise of something better, something more than he had ever known. He ate until the plate was empty, not a single grain remained. His small stomach was full for the first time in what felt like forever. Exhausted, he leaned back against the cold floor, his eyes fluttering shut, his body finally at peace. But peace, as Adajou had learned all too well, was fleeting. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Sharp slaps rang out one after another across his face, pulling him from his sleep. He cried out, confused, disoriented. Standing above him was Madame Kofo, her face twisted in anger, her eyes cold and filled with hate. You useless boy! Bye!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "Who gave you food? Where did you get rice to eat?" Adajou looked around in a daze. The plate, now empty, lay on the floor beside him. He pointed toward the picture of his mother, his lips trembling as he stammered, It was Mommy. My mommy gave it to me." At first there was silence, and then a cruel burst of laughter filled the room. His step-siblings standing in the doorway laughed until they could barely breathe, pointing at him, mocking him. "Your ghost mother cooked rice for you." They jeered, their laughter ringing through the room like a poison. Madame Kofo's laugh joined theirs, loud and harsh. "So now ghosts are feeding you," she sneered. "You're not only useless, but you're mad, too." With a cold, cruel smile, Madame Kofo grabbed Adajou by the ear and dragged him toward the kitchen. "Show me where you stole the food from," she ordered, her grip tightening painfully. "I didn't steal it," Adajou cried, his voice barely a whisper. "Mommy gave it to me, I swear." But Madame Kofo was not listening. Her anger like a storm raged on, and she picked up a long broomstick. With each stroke, the pain became unbearable. Adajou screamed, begged, cried for mercy, but it didn't matter. His body, weak and fragile, could no longer withstand the blows. She beat him until her arms grew tired, and then, without a word, she shoved him back into the small store and slammed the door behind him. Adajou lay there on the cold floor, his body aching, his heart heavy with the weight of the world. His stomach was empty again, the food his mother had miraculously provided, now nothing more than a fleeting memory. But despite the pain, despite the loneliness, Adajou knew one thing for certain: his mother had heard his cry, and she was still watching over him, even if she could not protect him from the cruelty of this world. The pain in Adajou's small body was not the worst of it. No, The worst part was the deep ache in his heart, a kind of emptiness that went beyond hunger. The scars on his back would fade eventually, but the loneliness, the feeling of being abandoned in a house filled with people who didn't care, it would never leave him. After the beating, the room was colder than it had ever been before. The harsh light of the afternoon filtered through the cracks in the wall, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. It seemed as though even the house itself was trying to distance itself from him, to turn away to hide. Adajou, weak and trembling, lay on the floor, his face pressed against the cold, hard earth. His eyes were swollen from crying, his body bruised and battered. But there was one thing he held on to: the memory of the food his mother had given it to him. It was the only thing that had felt real in weeks. The warm rice, the meat, the sense of being cared for, even if it was only for a moment. It was the only thing that kept him from slipping completely into the darkness of despair. He couldn't explain it. He didn't understand why it had happened, but every time he looked at the picture of his mother, he felt a strange warmth, a sense of connection that was too powerful to ignore. Adajou had tried to tell Madame Kofo about what had happened, about how the food had appeared out of nowhere, but she had only laughed cruel and mocking and slapped him hard across the face. Her words rang in his ears like poison. "Ghosts don't feed hungry children, boy. Don't you dare think you can fool me." That night, as the house grew still and quiet, Adajou couldn't sleep. His mind raced, replaying the events of the day. He had to know, he had to understand what was happening. It wasn't just hunger anymore, it was a mystery that seemed to be pulling him in like an invisible force, drawing him deeper into the darkness of the house. He stood up slowly, wincing as pain shot through his body. His legs felt like that they were made of lead, and every step was a struggle. But he had made up his mind. There was no way he could ignore this any longer. The picture of his mother hung on the wall, its frame chipped and worn from years of neglect. Adajou stepped toward it, his breath catching in his throat. His mother's gentle smile seemed to beckon him, a silent promise that she was still there, still watching over him, even if the world had forgotten him. He stared at the photo for what felt like hours, his heart racing in his chest. And then, just when he thought he couldn't take it any longer, something strange happened. The air in the room shifted like a gust of wind had blown through, though there was no breeze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he reached out tentatively, his hand hovering just above the picture frame. His heart pounded in his chest as he whispered, "Mommy, please, I need to know. What happened? Why did you feed me?" A strange warmth filled the room, as if his mother's presence was wrapping around him like a protective blanket. For a brief moment, he almost felt like she was there, standing beside him. His eyes closed and he whispered again, "Please, tell me what's going on." Then, as if answering his call, the picture flickered. It was subtle at first, like the image was shifting slightly, but then it became impossible to ignore. The picture of his mother, the smile on her face, began to change. The light in the photo grew brighter and the colors seemed to become more vivid. Adajou's breath caught in his throat as he watched, his eyes wide with disbelief. The warmth grew stronger, and for a moment he thought he saw a faint outline of his mother's figure just behind the glass. He reached out to touch it, his fingers trembling, and as soon as they made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him. His entire body seemed to come alive with the sensation, and he gasped in shock. The room seemed to spin around him, the walls blurring, and for a brief, disorienting moment, Adajou felt as if he were no longer in the house. He was somewhere else, somewhere beyond the physical world, somewhere beyond the reach of his father's indifference and Madame Kofo's cruelty. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The room was still again, the picture hanging in place, its image as calm and serene as it had always been. Adajou stumbled backward, his heart racing. What had just happened? Was it a dream? Was he losing his mind? But there was no denying the feeling that lingered in his chest, the warmth, the connection, the undeniable sense that something had changed. He was certain now his mother was still here. Somehow she was still watching over him, still trying to guide him even from beyond the grave. But why? What did she want him to know? Why had she fed him when she was gone? The questions filled his mind, swirling around like a storm, but one thing was clear. Adajou couldn't stay in that house any longer. He couldn't live under the same roof as Madame Kofo, couldn't endure the constant cruelty, the never-ending mocking and isolation, the food, the strange warmth, the feeling of his mother's presence. They were signs that something greater was at work, something beyond his understanding. As he stood there in the dimly lit room, Adajou made a decision. He would leave. He would leave this place, this prison of neglect and torment, and he would find the answers he so desperately needed. He didn't know where he would go, but he would go, he had to. The next day, under the cover of darkness, Adajou packed a small bag with what little he had. A few coins, a change of clothes, and a small piece of bread he had managed to sneak from the kitchen. He didn't know where he was going or how he would survive, but for the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope. He stepped into the cold night air, the moon casting a pale light over the village, and began to walk. His legs were weak, his body still bruised from the beating, but the drive inside him was stronger than ever. He had to find the answers. He had to know why his mother had fed him. He had to understand the mystery that had unfolded before him. As he walked, the village faded into the distance, and the weight of the house, the weight of his father's indifference, and Madame Kofo's cruelty seemed to lift from his shoulders. He was free. For the first time in what felt like forever, he was free. And as he walked into the unknown, a voice whispered through his mind. His mother's voice, soft but clear like a gentle breeze. "You are not alone, my son. I am with you always." The words were comforting, but they also filled him with a sense of urgency. Something was coming, something that would change everything. Adajou didn't know what it was, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a forgotten child. He was on a path to answers, and nothing, not even the world's cruelty, could stop him. Now Adajou's legs were stiff from the long walk, but he barely noticed. The world around him seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as though the very ground beneath his feet was alive, guiding him forward, urging him to keep going. The village behind him, with its crumbling houses and empty streets, faded into the distance like a bad dream. Ahead, there was only the vast unknown stretching out before him like a never-ending road. He had no destination, no plan. Only a deep, unshakable need to find answers. His heart raced a mix of fear and hope, intertwining with every step he took. What had happened to him? Why had his mother appeared to him through the portrait? And what did it all mean? These questions consumed him, driving him onward, making the pain in his body seem like a distant memory. The night air was cool, but it wasn't the chill that made him shiver. It was the feeling that something was watching him, something just beyond the edge of his awareness. Every now and then he thought he heard whisper-soft, unintelligible words that seemed to float on the wind, but when he stopped to listen, there was nothing, only the rustling of the leaves, the distant howls of animals, and the steady rhythm of his own breathing. He wasn't alone. He couldn't be. His mother's presence. That strange warmth he had felt before was still with him. It wrapped around him like a cloak, reassuring him, protecting him. But why? Why was she still here? Why had she come back to him in such an unusual way? As he walked, the landscape changed. The flat fields and scrubby trees of his village gave way to a dense forest, dark and silent, with towering trees that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. The path before him grew narrower, the shadows deeper, as if the forest itself was swallowing him whole, yet he didn't hesitate. He pressed forward, driven by the whispering voice that echoed in his mind. It wasn't long before he reached a clearing. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting a silvery glow on the ground. In the center of the clearing stood an old, weathered building, something between a shack and a small temple. The walls were covered in ivy, and the roof had long since caved in, leaving the structure open to the sky. It looked abandoned, yet there was an eerie sense of life about it, as if it had been waiting for him. Adajou stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the building. He could feel the pull, a magnetic force drawing him closer. The voice in his head, his mother's voice, urged him forward. "This is where you need to be, my son. Come." He swallowed hard, his throat dry, and took a tentative step forward. The ground was soft beneath his feet, and the air grew thick with the scent of moss and decay. As he crossed the threshold of the building, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The inside was dim, but he could make out the faint outline of a stone altar at the far end. Strange markings covered the walls, ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. It was as if the very air in this place was charged with something supernatural, something ancient. Adajou's heart raced as he approached the altar. On the stone slab there was a single object, a small, intricately carved wooden box. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to it as if it held the key to everything. His hand trembled as he reached out and touched the box. It was warm to the touch, as though it had been waiting for him just as his mother had. As his fingers brushed the surface, a sudden jolt of energy shot through him. His vision blurred, and for a moment he felt as if he were being pulled into another world. The walls of the shack seemed to dissolve, and he found himself standing in a vast empty space. It was like being suspended in time in a place where nothing existed except for him and the box. A voice echoed in the darkness, low and soothing, yet full of authority. "You seek the truth, Adajou, but are you ready for it?" The voice was familiar. It was his mother's voice, but different somehow. It was deeper, older, like it had been waiting for this moment for years. Adajou swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. "I don't understand. Why me? Why are you guiding me?" The voice was silent for a moment, as if considering his question. Then it spoke again, the words slow and deliberate. "Because you are the one who must carry it, the burden, the truth that has been hidden for so long." Adajou felt a cold chill seep into his bones and a knot twisted in his stomach. The truth. What truth? What had his mother been protecting him from all these years? The box in his hands began to glow, a soft golden light emanating from its cracks. Slowly it opened on its own, revealing a piece of parchment yellowed with age and covered in delicate, intricate writing. The writing was in a language he didn't recognize, yet somehow he understood it. The words seemed to seep into his mind, filling him with knowledge he couldn't explain. "The time has come," the voice continued, "to uncover the secrets of your bloodline. Your mother was not just a woman, Adajou. She was a guardian, a protector of the truth, and you, my son, are the heir to that legacy." Adajou's mind reeled. A guardian, a protector of the truth. What was all this? He had thought his life had been ordinary, one of pain and struggle, a boy who had lost his mother and was left to fend for himself. But now everything was different. There was something greater at play, something much more powerful than he had ever imagined. He looked down at the parchment in his hands, his fingers trembling as he traced the symbols with his eyes. The words were still unclear, but one thing was certain: his journey was far from over. He had come this far, and now he had to know the rest of the story. He had to uncover the secrets of his bloodline, the truth his mother had hidden from him. "The path will not be easy," the voice warned. "There will be those who try to stop you, those who want to keep the truth buried, but you must stay strong. Adajou, you are the key, and you will not be alone." Adajou's heart pounded in his chest. "What do you mean, who will help me?" The voice was quiet for a moment before it answered, its tone soft but filled with a sense of finality. "The ones who are meant to find you will trust in them, trust in yourself." The light from the box began to fade and the vision blurred once again. Adajou stumbled backward, his mind spinning, and suddenly he was back in the old shack. The wooden box now closed in his hands. The air was still, and the strange energy that had filled the space seemed to dissipate, leaving him with nothing but the weight of the knowledge he had just uncovered. He looked down at the box, his hands shaking as he clutched it tightly. The truth was within his reach, but it was clear now that the journey ahead would be far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. There were forces at work here, forces that had been waiting for him to awaken, waiting for him to step into the role he was destined to play. Adajou knew one thing for certain: he couldn't turn back now. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers and unknown challenges, but he was no longer just a boy running from his past. He was the heir to something far greater, and nothing, not even the darkness that lurked in the corners of the world, could stop him from finding the truth. Thank you so much for watching and following Adajou's journey to the very end. Your support means the world to us, and we hope this story touched your heart as much as it did ours. If you enjoyed this tale and want to see more stories like it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your subscription helps us bring you more captivating narratives. We'd love to hear your thoughts, leave a comment, and share how this story made you feel. Until next time, stay inspired and keep believing in the power of love and hope.